How is it that the more you tried to hold on, the faster they pulled away? That question has been sitting in your chest for weeks now, maybe longer. You've answered it 100 different ways in your head. You probably came up with 10 different versions of what you did wrong. 12 different moments you replayed, looking for the exact second you lost them. You've checked their last scene more times than you'd ever admit to anyone. You've slept with their old voice notes just to hear the way they used to say your name. You've drafted messages at 2 a.m., deleted them, rewritten them shorter, deleted those too, and finally sent something you'd regret by morning, or sent nothing at all and hated yourself for being too proud to say it. Here's what nobody tells you. You weren't losing them because you weren't trying hard enough. You were losing them because trying harder was the exact thing their nervous system couldn't survive. And that changes everything about how you understand this entire breakup, this entire pattern, this entire relationship with someone who loved you in their own broken way and still couldn't stay. Picture a version of yourself from 3 months ago. You were lying in bed with your phone pressed against your chest, staring at the ceiling, running the same conversation back through your mind for the 100th time. Did I push too hard? Was I too emotional? Should I have given them more space? Was the problem me? You probably asked yourself all of these things before you even got out of bed this morning. They're not new questions. They're the questions that have replaced the relationship inside your head. And underneath all of them is the same quiet terror you've been trying not to look at directly. The fear that you weren't enough, that you couldn't be enough, that if you had just been softer, smaller, easier, less needy, less emotional, less present, maybe they would have stayed. Here's what's actually true. You didn't push too hard because you were wrong. You pushed hard because you were scared. And they pulled away because they were just as scared, only in a completely different direction. Your chasing wasn't coming from a place of neediness. It was coming from a place of panic. Their withdrawal wasn't coming from a place of cruelty. It was coming from a place of survival. Two nervous systems in the same room, both drowning, both unable to signal for help the way the other one needed to receive it. That's not a character flaw. That's not a failure of love. That's an attachment mismatch playing out in real time, in slow motion, in the exact way it almost always plays out when an anxious person's instinct is to pursue and an avoidance instinct is to disappear. This is the part about chasing an avoidant that nobody ever explains honestly. The cultural story says love is something you fight for. The cultural story says if you just love them harder, prove it louder, show up more, write the longer message, send the second text, give them one more chance to come back, eventually, they'll choose you. That's the script your friends handed you. That's the script every breakup song on repeat handed you. Fight for love. Don't give up. Real love doesn't quit. And somewhere inside that script, you've been running yourself ragged, trying to live up to a version of love that was never going to land on this person the way you needed it to. Because chasing an avoidant doesn't activate their love. It activates their defense system. Every single time. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 things most people chasing an avoidant never figure out, regardless of how long they chase. First, why your chasing actually made their withdrawal faster, not slower, and the precise internal experience your pursuit created inside their body that you couldn't see from where you were standing. Second, what specifically starts happening inside the avoidant's mind when you finally stop chasing and step back, and the very moment inside their nervous system when their posture toward you begins to quietly shift. And third, the precise emotional turning point when they move from silence to suddenly missing you to something dangerously close to begging you to come back, and why that moment happens almost like clockwork once you stop doing the one thing their body was bracing against the entire time. If you have ever wondered why they pulled away, why they went cold, why they acted like the whole relationship meant nothing when you know in your bones it meant everything, let's get into it. The reason chasing feels like love to you is because your nervous system is wired to interpret closeness as safety. The more you pursue, the more your body tells itself, I am fighting for this. I am choosing this. I am staying. That wiring is not a flaw. It's not something to fix. It's the same wiring that pushed you into the relationship in the first place, that made you light up when they texted back, that made you feel chosen when they finally opened up on a rare quiet night and told you something real about the version of themselves they hide from everyone else. Your system is designed to move toward. That's how y'all bond. That's how you attach. And in almost every other relationship dynamic, that instinct would have been the most powerful thing you brought into the partnership. But an avoidance nervous system is wired in the opposite direction. Their body doesn't experience closeness as safety. It experiences closeness as flooding. Not because they don't feel anything for you, because their system learned very early, often decades before they ever met you, that being deeply seen by another person was unsafe. Maybe they were a child who got punished for showing emotion. Maybe they were a teenager who watched vulnerability get weaponized by someone they trusted. Maybe they were a young adult who loved once and got swallowed by it, and their body decided, somewhere underneath their conscious mind, that the safest version of themselves would be the one who never lets another person in far enough to lose them again. That decision lives in their nervous system, not their personality. It runs underneath every interaction they have with you, every moment they pull back, every quiet evening when you can tell they've emotionally left the room even though their body is still sitting next to you on the couch. So picture what was happening inside them every single time you pursued. You were doing something your body told you was love, sending the message, showing up, asking for reassurance, asking to talk, asking where their head was at. And their body was reading every single one of those moves the way you'd read a slow-moving fire heading toward the room where you keep everything that matters. Their heart rate would tick up. Their chest would tighten. They would feel the urge to flee or freeze rising in their body before they could even name what was happening. And because most avoidants never learned to identify what their own nervous system is doing in real time, they would translate that overwhelm into something you could see. Withdrawal, irritability, a clipped answer, a sudden need for space, a cold shoulder that made no sense given the conversation you thought you were having. They weren't punishing you. They were surviving you as best they knew how. That is the part most chasing partners never see. They assume the withdrawal is a choice. They assume the coldness is a verdict. They assume if the other person just loved them enough, they would fight through the discomfort and stay. But what most people do not understand is that the avoidant is already fighting, just not in the direction you're expecting. You're fighting to keep them close. They're fighting to keep themselves intact. Those are two completely different wars. And your pursuit, no matter how loving, was registering as the front line of theirs every single time. This is also where the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant differ in ways that matter. Most people use the word avoidant like it's one personality, but the internal experience of being pursued is profoundly different depending on which subtype you're dealing with. A dismissive avoidant experiences your pursuit as suffocation. Their system wants distance from you because distance is the only place their body has ever found itself in one piece. When you chase, they go quiet, they go distant, they go stone. They may even still love you deeply inside that silence, but their body has decided that preserving the self is more urgent than preserving the relationship. And that decision will override whatever their heart is quietly asking them to do. A fearful avoidant, on the other hand, experiences your pursuit as a terrifying contradiction. Part of them wants to be reached. Part of them is desperate to be reached, especially by you. But the louder part of them is panicking at the cost. They want the closeness. They fear what it will demand of them. They want to be held. They fear being held in place. So they oscillate, leaning in for 2 days, vanishing for the next 7, sending you a charged message at midnight, then disappearing again the moment you respond. Their nervous system is caught between two competing survival strategies, and they cannot resolve it by themselves. Both subtypes eventually withdraw under pursuit, but the dismissive avoidance withdrawal feels like a wall, and the fearful avoidance withdrawal feels like an unending riddle you can't solve. And here's the part about chasing that almost no one is honest enough to say out loud. Chasing is not just a strategy that fails. Chasing is a form of self-abandonment that masquerades as love. Every time you pursued an avoidant who was asking for space, you were teaching your own nervous system that their comfort mattered more than yours. Every time you swallowed your own needs to keep the peace, every time you bit your tongue to keep them from disappearing, every time you softened your real feelings so their system could tolerate you a little longer, you were slowly disappearing inside the relationship. And the version of you that was trying to hold it together was nothing like the version they fell in love with in the first place. The person they connected with at the beginning was the one who had a center. The person left holding the bag was the one who had given theirs away. So this isn't about blaming yourself. You chased because your nervous system was terrified of losing them. That's a human response. That's not a moral failing. But the deeper truth is this: chasing an avoidant doesn't bring them closer. It validates the original wound their body has been carrying for years. Every pursuit quietly says to their system, see, closeness really is unsafe. See, love really does cost too much. See, the only thing you can trust is distance. And until that message stops being sent, their body will keep finding ways to make it true. The first 48 hours feel like relief to them. Not joy, not peace. Just the quiet exhale of a body that has finally, after months on edge, stopped bracing. Your message was the alarm they couldn't shut off for the entire stretch of the relationship. The new voice note they owed you. The unreturned call they had been mentally rehearsing an apology for. The check-in text they had been quietly composing and deleting all afternoon. Knowing whatever they said would not be enough to take the pressure off and would not be honest enough to satisfy the version of you they had been holding at arm's length for weeks. When your silence begins, something inside that has been clenched for months unclenches. They sleep better for 2 nights. They go for longer walks. They feel the texture of their own day again instead of managing yours. And for those first 72 hours, they will tell themselves this is exactly what they needed. They will narrate the silence to themselves as proof that you were the source of the overwhelm, that the relationship was too much, that their instincts were right all along to keep things at a careful distance. This is the version of the story their nervous system has been quietly writing the entire time. The one that lets them keep their positions. The one that doesn't require them to admit that they loved you and lost you at the same time. But somewhere underneath that narration, almost immediately, often before the 3rd day even closes, a different signal starts. It begins small. A song on a random playlist that they haven't heard in months. A stranger in a coffee shop who tilts their head the way you do when you're listening to something you actually care about. A reference in a book they were already reading that they would have texted you about 2 months ago. The signal is so faint at first that they brush past it. They mistake it for nothing. They tell themselves it's just one of those moods that everyone gets nostalgic, that this is a normal human fluctuation and has nothing to do with you. So they keep moving, they keep working, they keep doing the version of their day that doesn't include you in it. But by the end of week 1, the signal has gotten louder, and this is the part of no contact that gets misunderstood by absolutely everyone. The popular story says no contact works because it teaches the avoidant a lesson. It makes them miss you. It punishes them for pulling away. That's the version most people administering no contact operate from, and it's a childish version, and it's also why most implementations of no contact quietly collapse after 10 days. Because if you're doing it for revenge or for leverage, you'll feel your own panic rising at day 6, day 8, day 11. You'll break. You'll send the message. You'll reset the entire dynamic, and the cycle begins again from a slightly worse starting position. That version of no contact doesn't work because it isn't aimed at the right thing. The version of no contact that actually does something structural is the one where you withdraw not to make them miss you, but to remove the very input their defense system has been responding to. You're not withholding attention as a strategy. You're uninstalling pressure from a system that was using all of its available energy to manage that pressure instead of processing the relationship underneath it. When the pressure is removed, the system doesn't immediately feel the absence as a loss. It feels it as a slow recalibration. The threat responses that were constantly running begin to power down. The hypervigilance that was once keeping them emotionally available just enough to perform the relationship begins to thin out. They start to feel the version of themselves that existed before they met you, the one who could sit with their own thoughts for an entire afternoon The one who didn't have a low-grade knot in their chest every time they picked up their phone. And this is the moment their interior life begins to form a different shape around you. The question they're not ready to ask yet is this: where did that person go? Not you. They're asking about themselves. Where did the version of them that was curious about you go? Where did the part of them that used to lean in go? Where did the version that told you about their childhood and actually let you in for one entire Sunday afternoon go? They've been so busy defending against pressure that they have not had the internal bandwidth to actually look at what they've been missing. They have been so busy trying to protect the wall they built around themselves that they never registered that the wall was also keeping out the thing they secretly wanted most. And around week 3 or 4, sometimes later, sometimes earlier, depending on the depth of the bond, something inside the storage layer where they keep you begins to shift. The memories of you were filed under defense. They treated every recollection of the relationship as evidence to justify their withdrawal. They told themselves the way you cried during that one fight meant they had to leave. They told themselves the way you texted them at midnight meant you were too much. They told themselves 1,000 small, defensive stories about you to keep their own internal architecture intact. But once the threat system has been powered down long enough, those stories start to feel thin. The memory of you laughing in their kitchen at something they'd forgotten they'd said begins to surface unwalled. The way your hand felt on the back of their neck during that walk they took together on a Sunday morning starts to register as sensation instead of threat. They begin almost involuntarily to retrieve you from the place inside themselves where you were filed. And what rises up is not the curated version of you that justified their leaving. What rises up is the real version of you, and it is missing. Once that missing registers inside their body, the next 72 hours can move fast. They will suddenly wonder whether they made a mistake. They will start drafting a message they won't send. They will open your profile once, twice, 6 times. They will listen to a song you sent them 4 months into the relationship and almost text you a lyric. They will scroll back through old photos with a feeling in their chest they don't have a name for yet. They are now officially in the territory that the entire cultural narrative about avoidance quietly skips over, because the cultural narrative only knows 2 versions of avoidant behavior, the cold version and the desperate version. But what is actually happening inside them here, in this in-between space, is the most psychologically interesting interior moment in the entire dynamic. Because for the first time since the breakup, they are moving towards you from the inside, not being pulled towards you by pressure from the outside. Their body is not responding to your pursuit. Their body is responding to its own emerging longing, and those 2 things are worlds apart. One recreates the cycle, the other rewires the terms of the entire relationship. Whether they reach out, when they reach out, and how they reach out, that is the layer we will pull apart in the final section. Because here is the part no one is honest about yet. When an avoidant comes back, what they're coming back from is not the absence of you. They're coming back from the sudden gut-level recognition that they taught themselves to live without the one person who made them feel more like themselves than they had felt in years. And that recognition is doing something inside them they are not equipped to manage on their own. The begging is rarely what it looks like from the outside. The cultural story paints the avoidant return as a romantic reawakening. The cold, impenetrable person who deactivated collapses into a puddle of regret and suddenly wants you back with their whole chest. That's the version your friends want for you. That's the version the revenge fantasies at 3 a.m. rehearse in vivid detail. The avoidant crawls back. They admit they were wrong. They cry. They promise it will be different this time. The fantasy ends with you choosing whether to take them back. That fantasy is not what is happening. What is actually happening when an avoidant returns after weeks of silence is something structural inside their threat system has finally recomputed. Your absence stopped registering as rejection long enough ago that your face in their memory stopped triggering their defenses. The nervous system that was bracing against you is now bracing against the version of their day that doesn't include you in it. They are not coming back because they missed you. They are coming back because something inside them cannot stabilize without you, and they are only just now noticing that the absence has cost them more than the closeness ever did. That is a profoundly different thing than missing someone. That is a nervous system finally telling the truth about what it actually needs after months of misdirection. And inside that moment, what's moving through them isn't a single clean thought. It's a cascade. Something like, "I think I lost someone I cannot replace," followed almost immediately by, "I don't know if she'll even want to hear from me." That second sentence isn't doubt about their feelings. That's doubt about their own defensibility. They're afraid not that you don't love them. They're afraid that what they did to earn the breakup is too heavy to come back from. They are not coming back as someone who feels safe. They are coming back as someone who finally realized safety was the question. But there are two very different returns, and almost no one teaches the difference. The first version is a nervous system reset. They have actually done some internal work. The new message they send isn't a bootleg of their old patterns dressed up in softer language. They have started to look at themselves differently. They are showing up with a different kind of language about what went wrong. And that language includes the word I far more than it includes the word you. That return is rare. That return is also the only version worth considering, because what changed inside them is the only thing that would have changed the dynamic between you. The second version is a honeymoon re-engagement. Nothing inside them has actually changed. They're simply no longer able to white-knuckle their way through the loneliness of being without you. They come back softer, more attentive, more poetic about the relationship than they ever were inside it. The version of you they describe on their return is almost a different person. The curated version, the idealized version, the one that conveniently doesn't include all the ways they made you feel hunted and small. That return is not a real return. That return is your avoidant ex relapsing into a fantasy of you, because the reality of being without you became unbearable for 1 week. That return will not last 90 days. The same pattern, with slightly different packaging, will find its way back into the room. And the trap most people fall into is the speed at which they accept either return. Because the moment your avoidant ex sends that first message after the silence, every cell in your body lights up. Your nervous system has been on high alert since the breakup, finally being told the answer is yes. So you respond instantly. You respond warmly. You respond with the version of yourself that has been waiting at the door this entire time. And in doing that, you hand them back the dynamic before they have even finished proving they can hold it differently. The reunion happens at the speed of your relief, not at the speed of their actual change. And that is where almost every cycling, anxious avoidant dynamic quietly collapses inside 90 days of getting back together. What you are actually being asked to do during their return is not to forgive them. It is to observe them, to let the return arrive without immediately handing them the position they used to hold, to let the new language they are using reveal itself over time rather than rewarding it with full re-entry on day one. That is the work the moment requires, and almost no one inside this dynamic is emotionally ready to do that work, because the cost of patience, while they keep asking to come back, feels indistinguishable from the cost of waiting during no contact, even though it is a fundamentally different kind of waiting. But here is the part the entire video has been quietly pointing toward. The deepest version of this work is not what to do when they come back. The deepest version of this work is what you are becoming inside yourself, regardless of whether they ever return at all. Because the truth underneath the truth is this: the pulling, the chasing, the drafting of messages at 2 a.m., the obsession with whether you'll get them back, none of that is a strategy. All of that is your own nervous system outsourcing its sense of safety to someone who is structurally unable to provide it. And the deepest reorientation this video can offer you is to notice that very specific outsourcing in yourself, to see it clearly, and to begin the slow, unglamorous, non-Instagram-worthy work of learning to anchor your safety somewhere inside your own body rather than inside theirs. That work doesn't guarantee they come back. That work doesn't promise you a particular ending. What it does is change the architecture of who you are inside the next relationship, whether it's with them or with someone you've never met yet. It changes the cost of being left. It changes the way you show up when closeness gets hard. It changes the version of you that walks into the next room carrying less defensive weight. And somewhere inside that reorientation is the realization that the deepest version of getting what you actually wanted was never about getting them back. It was about becoming someone whose nervous system no longer needs someone to beg in order to feel whole. The love you were looking for in their silence was the love you were capable of offering yourself the entire time. If someone had taken the time to point it out, that's what this entire arc was actually moving toward. Not a reunion, a returning, the kind that doesn't depend on whether they ever knock again. Real love doesn't start the moment someone comes back to you. It starts the moment you stop waiting for them to, and decide to be what makes you feel safe in your own body, in your own story, in your own hands. That's the only reunion that lasts. And it was always the only one that was going to last anyway.